This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Kyle Dunn. He has been involved in the sale of $2 billion worth of industrial lubricant, bulk fuel, web development services, syndicated digital images, luxury real estate, and LPs for funds. That means he's done a lot of raising assets for hedge funds. But he's clearly raised assets for a lot of things. And I actually repeat that bio in the conversation. It's kind of fun to get his reaction. But I like these types of conversations. Sometimes we get all focused on the thing we do. But how do we explain what we do to other people? How do we share with other people what we do, how we do it? The marketing is always terribly important. And if you have not paid attention to the marketing side of the equation, you'll enjoy this conversation. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my conversation today with Kyle Dunn. I hope you enjoy. I can think back to the early 90s. I was using a Mac. Man, it was like the DOS of the world, making fun of me, et cetera, et cetera. But I was one of those people imprinted very early. And clearly, that brand establishment where Apple was an outsider, even in the early 90s where they were possibly going to fail before Jobs came back, that love, that brand love that they established with a niche was clearly, ultimately, going to be something that worked out for them in the long run. They were worried about brand very early.
They all part, whether a hedge fund or private equity fund, we work with both. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, they were cool. They were elusive. They were mysterious. You could walk around and say you operate a hedge fund and people are like, what the hell's that? They're not cool or elusive anymore. No one gives a shit anymore. This whole anti-marketing vibe that was created by these finance people who thought they were really trendy and cool and mysterious. Well, that shit's sailed. You have to be prominent. You have to be present. To do that, you have to communicate consistently. Well, if you're going to communicate consistently, you can't just talk about performance. Because what if you don't perform? I walk in all these rooms and it says, can you guarantee performance? No. Well, why build your entire marketing platform on something you can't guarantee your clients or your customers? That just sounds crazy, but you do it. Why?
Let me share a story with you that you may be familiar with. I'm sure you are familiar with. Back in the day, I was working on this second book about the turtles. That was a complicated undertaking. That entire situation was built on mystique. It was a secret. When I started writing that book and putting things together, doing interviews, I don't know exactly how many legal threats there were. It was more than one. A mutual associate of ours, Sean Jordan, looked at the situation, knew me a little bit, just a tiny bit, but looked at the situation and said, well, hold on. The guy that I'm working with, Salem, has something to add to this story, which I didn't know. I didn't know all the details. And Sean, looking around, said, let's get this guy Mike down to Canadian Texas. Let's get him talking to Salem. Because, yeah, some of the turtles were talking to me at that time. Some weren't. But it was always mystery. It was always, give me one piece now, I'll give you another piece later. And then finally, when I talked to Salem, it was a completely open book. People might not necessarily know how that all unfolded, but speaks to what you're talking about, which is the mystery part is great, maybe for a period of time, and then it's not.
If you look at the people who built their business on that mysteriousness, that elusiveness, those are the two sigmas. They've been around for a while. You can't build assets like that anymore because the world's changed.
You're really talking to, and I know plenty of guys that have tried this, plenty of guys in the last 15 or 20 years that were inspired by some of the early alt CTA types. They say, hey, I'm going to go do this myself. And the biggest problem they get into is the problem that you figured out. They figure out the system. They figure out the performance. And then nobody knows who the hell they are. They've got no client base and they've got no marketing.
lots of times they don't have the Goldman big name behind them anymore, so they're no longer cool. You have a shelf life. When you leave an established, if you're a trader, you leave an established world, you try to start your own thing. You have a shelf life before no one cares about you. To maintain prominence, you have to consistently communicate. It comes back to that. That world was just not used to that. They're still not really used to that. It's changing. When I first started in this world, I would talk about videos. Everyone says video will never fly in this industry. We created the first hedge fund video with a professional surfer. It was right when the Jobs Act came through. It's probably the most successful thing we did. It was a company called Top Turn, Dan and Greg, awesome people. People couldn't believe there's a professional surfer in this hedge fund video. Those people are insane. But what ended up happening is they were on every news show, talk show. Everyone watched it. Everyone knew the video at the time. It was done at such a professional level where the production value was really strong. What creates tension? And tension creates engagement. Engagement creates the start of a sales cycle. This industry really struggles with that. They're boring.
I'll share with you something that happened to me back in the day. I was speaking for Hong Kong Bank at the time, CLSA, in Hong Kong. CLSA, for those that may or may not know, they kind of did things a little bit different. They'd have interesting events. And this was very rare. But here, it was just a typical suit speaking thing. Felt kind of boring, felt kind of typical. And then they were like, well, we got something special planned for you tonight after everyone spoke or whatever. We walked through all this maze of alleyways and awnings and whatnot through Hong Kong, and we ended up in some auditorium. This was probably, I don't know, maybe even 15, 20 years ago, but they had hired freaking Duran Duran. 500 people in the room, and they freaking hired Duran Duran pretty much at their peak. It was amazing. It sticks out for me because that was so rare that something happened like that, where somebody was making it fun.
One of the funnest things that didn't happen was with actual Salem and Sean Jordan. We did a video for Salem and Abraham back in the day. We thought it'd be amazing if Sam Elliott was the narrator. We tried. We got in touch with his agent. Salem was totally all in. Sam just was like, I'm not doing that. That's crazy.
What you should have done is what they did to me, which was put me into a damn helicopter with his brother driving, trying to pull G's, trying to get us to all puke as he's chasing, I don't know what they were, gazelle on the plains of that ranch. That I don't know how that could have been made into a video for fundraising. That was an experience. I'm sure that happened to you at some point in time.
Not there, but in my real estate days, I ended up with a developer where we were chasing wild boar in the swamps of Georgia at a time. And we were doing the same thing, almost died. It was crazy.
Let me take you back to some basics, though. Let's say you and I, we sit down at the airport. I don't know shit about you, but I start to lament my situation. My situation could be one of three things. I'm in the process. I have some interesting, it can be an interesting startup. It could be a film. It could be anything. I sit there and I tell you, I don't really know what path I should proceed with, but I need to raise $1 million, or the story could be I need to raise 30 million, or the story could be I need to raise $1 billion. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are thinking, well, I can imagine myself in that situation. But this world that you exist in, this world that you've excelled in, people don't know where to start. They really don't know where to start. When you hear people that don't have the marketing experience, but they know what they need. I need that bag. I need to get that bag. That bag is going to help me to get done what I need to get done. How do you start to bring people into the basics? I mean, even going back to your start, how do you start to bring people into the basics of selling? I happen to have it in front of me. I don't know what you think of it. Quite little famous book on selling, which I'm sure you've seen. I don't know what your perspective of him or the book was. It seems like basic stuff. How do you start to bring people in? If I lay that scenario out, we're sitting at the airport.
It's really easy. You nailed it. You talk about story. You have to tell people how to structure their story. People in this world, this business, they don't do that. What does that mean? Well, structuring your story is about how you layer your story. What you notice when you're in this industry, you walk into a room, and whether you're starting a fund or you're running a $30 billion fund, it doesn't really matter. No one really does it well. You ask them, why should I give a shit about you? And it's amazing what happens when you ask that question. People start talking. 10 minutes later, they're still talking. They've completely lost your interest. How do you start when someone says, what do you do? Or why should I care? You care for this reason, this reason, this reason. It's amazing that you can come up with those reasons if you understand that the intent is to be able to say that quickly. It's just like that. It's not talking for 10 minutes. Why should you invest with us? You invest with us for this reason, this reason, this reason. If you can't do that, you don't know how to structure your story. In modern marketing, what the industry is really challenged with is these are complex stories. They're complex products. They're complex strategies. And everyone thinks that there's no possible way that you can simplify it. Well, people are so goddamn busy, you have to. No one really sits down and goes, this is the core fundamental things that make us interesting. If you brainstorm that, you think about that, and you can write 3 sentences. This was one of our core products that we sold to people. Tell me 3 reasons why I should care. In marketing, you have to understand people don't absorb your story in one sitting typically, especially when you're selling stuff. You read a book, yeah, someone may read the whole book. That's not a common intro point to selling something. What you have to do is you have to understand, okay, I'm going to say a little bit, just a very, very little. If you say, this is why you care, 1, 2, 3, then you can go, does that interest you? If you do that well, it's pretty unlikely the person across the table is going to say no. Oh, so they said, I'm interested in that. The dynamic of that situation just changed dramatically, because if you get an LP saying, yes, I'm interested, if they say no, that's perfect. If they say no, then you don't have to waste the next 6 months trying to get them interested. No is fine. But if you really think about it, and if you can't come up with those 3 reasons, don't try to sell that product. It's not a good thing to sell. In hedge fund people, they don't do that. They don't do a competitive analysis. If you really don't know why an LP should invest with you, go do something else or stop, then figure it out before you try to start the fund.
Can you give me an example, whether real or hypothetical example of 3 reasons so people can wrap their arms around where you're going here?
We're humble. We have the courage to challenge how people think about risk and investing. We'll keep our word. That's why you invest with us.
Psychologically, speak to why the brevity is so important. There's a confidence thing there.
It allows people to be interested. If you can't frame a story in an interesting way, it's going to be hard for people to engage in that story. Be interesting. A way to think about that is, we made this shit up, but we call it marketing risk. Everyone in this business understands investment risk. You want a higher return, you have to absorb risk. Everyone wants the money. Everyone wants the LPs. Well, they don't understand that you have to take risks to change the trajectory of your marketing efforts. It's a hard world out there. If you understand that and you understand, okay, I'm going to, instead of walking in a room and talking about all the alphas and the deltas and the betas and all that sort of stuff, you walk in a room and you say, this is why you fundamentally give a shit about it. The room stops. Now the trick is never give power back to the LP. When you say, this is why we're interesting, this is what you should look at and see. Here's a 2-pager. What you're going to look at this 2-page, I want you to look at these few things. If that interests you, I can send you the deck. These LPs, they're not gods. This industry treats them like gods. They need one side as much as the other side needs them. Take control of the environment, but you have to structure your story, and you have to understand they're going to absorb a bit. They're going to go to your website. They're going to bounce around. They may look at your deck. They're going to slowly acclimatize towards what you are and whether they're interested.
If you walk into the room, instead of going to 3 brief reasons that you outlined, most people, or a lot of people, I don't know how to phrase that, are going to feel like, I need to get a lot more out than that. I need to say a lot more. I need to get into the nitty gritty. I need to get into the details. It starts to become white noise, doesn't it?
You do, but you have to qualify. I'm not naive. I've done this more than most people for this specific business. I understand how the game works. But if you say, okay, these are 3 reasons why you care, but what you've done, if you've structured your story appropriately and you've layered your story and you've thought about it, you can say, on this first point, these are things that we're really getting at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It doesn't matter at that point. Second point, this is what's really important. Third point, these are the things that you need to be aware of. But you can't just say it all at once. You have to be interesting. You really have to think about how you structure those words so you're not boring. We did a lot of LP perception studies where we would call LPs of all sizes, shapes, global basis, and we would ask them, what do you think about these guys? It's incredible when you start talking to LPs and they start to feel comfortable with you, the stories that they tell about how people, they come in the room and they have a running game about how many times someone says we're top quartile. They'll bet M&Ms on the meeting. Okay, I bet this guy is going to say top quartile 5 times. Marketing and the conversations have become so cliche in this business that no one says anything of importance. Everyone will get to your performance. Of course, you don't have to try. They're going to get there. The performance doesn't meet their expectations based on your risk. You're never getting the money. Don't worry about talking about performance. Be interesting. That's just hard to do.
As I read your biodiversity out a minute ago, take me back in time. I don't care what age. It's going to be a younger age than right now. When did you first, how did you first start to have these basic understandings? Because we're talking about asset raising in the hedge fund space. But again, you've raised assets over a wide, diverse range of things. Where did this selling understanding, is there a moment? Is there a period of time? Something? I know some of your early story, but I want you to share how this thinking started in you.
I'm sitting in Northern Canada right now. I grew up in a small town. I worked in sawmills. I didn't come from this world. Where I learned this is awesome. I was selling industrial lubricants. I would drive around a truck, see a piece of equipment, stop and go knock on the door. I learned in that process that you had to be engaging and interesting.
I can remember back in the day, I'm probably one of the few people running a podcast that can operate a backhoe. I remember we had to fill these suckers up with the fluids at various points in time. Me and my father could have been a potential client back in the day. Break it down more. How do you start to, you say you got to be interesting. Okay. What does that mean exactly?
You got to figure out what's actually cool about what you're selling. I was selling hydraulic fluid. It's a commodity. I was selling 76, those orange antenna balls. People wanted those orange antenna balls more than they wanted my hydraulic fluid. I would say, I'll give you an orange antenna ball if you'd listen to me. Sure. Figure out what's interesting. 76 was the largest sponsor of NASCAR. People want to go to NASCAR. So I'd walk on the door and say, do you want to go to NASCAR? Damn right, I want to go to NASCAR. Well, if you do this, there's this promotion, you buy this shit, you can maybe go to NASCAR.
How did you figure that out, though? You have to get to the point. What mistake did you make? How did that revelation happen so early on?
Pure, raw failure. Failure of selling stuff and failing and failing and failing until I just started trying shit. Selling hydraulic fluid, that is a commodity to people who don't want it, was tough. I got tired. The first thing I ever really sold, I was driving to where I'm sitting right now. I had a case of beer in my truck. It was worth $20. A pail of hydraulic fluid worth $18. And I go to this guy, I said, if you buy the hydraulic fluid, I'll give you this case of beer. That was the first thing I ever sold.
You got to the point where you had nothing to lose?
Nothing to lose. It's different when you're in the world that we're both in, and as you age and you mature and you learn. But that's the hard part. The hard part is when you're starting a fund, you have nothing to lose. Because if you aren't successful, you're done. Now we're coming back to marketing risk. Take some marketing risk. And that doesn't mean you have to be crazy and dress up in a gorilla suit, which most people assume. That just means maybe make a website that's different. Maybe make a video that's different. We put a professional surfer in a hedge fund video. It kicked ass. Why? Because everyone's like, why is there a professional surfer in a hedge fund video?
But why did you not shift? Okay, so you start selling hydraulic fluid. It's not working. But you eventually have these revelations of like, hey, if I can give some swag with things, they're going to buy. A lot of people might start selling and they never get to the point where it's, I can augment my selling with this. Did you feel like if you didn't figure out how to sell the hydraulic fluid, you were going to be a loser? Why did you not go do something else?
Because I hate losing. I'm one of the most competitive human beings on earth. I wanted to win. I was going to sell some shit. I just needed to figure out how to do it. What I really learned through that process is you have to be yourself. There's a consistency involved in selling. It's really hard. This is very applicable to this industry, but I learned it a million years ago. I walked into a guy's shop every week for a year. After that year, he then asked me what I was trying to sell him. He didn't even process who I was, why I was fucking there. But eventually he did. And eventually he bought something. He goes, you know what? I'm going to buy something from you because you keep showing up. He's like, I appreciate that. If you're selling an investment product, a hedge fund, an ETF, private equity fund, whatever, the war isn't necessarily performing. The war is being in front of someone until they buy. If your product is good enough and you're always the one in the room, you'll probably get the business. You can't be that person who walks into a room and says, will you give me money? Will you give me money? Will you give me money? So when you keep showing up, and all I'm doing is just describing a content marketing strategy, you have to participate in the community consistently, not look like an idiot until people recognize your name. That's really hard to do in a very saturated market. The more saturated the market, the harder it is to clear the noise. And everyone's so focused on this magic button. There is no magic button. It's understanding, okay, how do I consistently build brand and build awareness ahead of where I'm at today? People starting a fund. They're not going to walk and get Texas teachers day one. When are you going to start structuring awareness into the Texas teachers? Because the last goddamn thing you want to do is ask for money on a first phone call, because then you look like a greasy salesman. In advance of knowing how you're going to mature through the LP community, you have to start marketing to that next tier way earlier on than this industry does in order for them to feel like they know you.
I have at least two clients, that have informed me. They ended up spending $3,000 on trading research with me, but they both informed me at various points in time in the last 20 years, hey, Mike, I've been following you for 8 years. Both of them said 8 years. I've been following you for 8 years. I finally decided to buy something.
It's awesome. The person who introduced us, Sean, he's brilliant at understanding that that's the game. I've read all the marketing books, all the sales books. You have to touch someone 7 times before they buy something. No, that's bullshit. It's like 70 times. It's getting worse and worse and worse, especially if you're always asking for something. Think about, when have you ever wanted to buy something from someone who just pesters you? Never. This industry is not different.
That includes relationships as well. If you bother that woman every day, every minute, she's eventually going to call the police. But if you just lots of space, she might come to a realization that you're okay.
If you engage with the woman or the guy in a different way, in a consistent basis, and you're respectful, you'll probably get in a conversation with her. It's not different in this LP business. This is a very different world. Marketing is something you do when you don't know who the buyer is. Our business, we all know who the buyers are. I can press a button and get Prekin or PitchBook, whatever. I can get all the names. It's not about who these people are. It's how do you get in touch with them? It's a vastly different question.
Sean Jordan, who we've talked about in this podcast so far, maybe you were there back in the day, but through Sean, I had a chance to meet, or at least see behind the scenes, probably not for the first time, but up close, some of the, quote, big institutional investors, let's say the government guy running the Texas Teachers Fund or whatever. And I think traders starting out or funds starting out, if you've not met these people, maybe they get put up on a pedestal because they're just a name and there's a bunch of numbers behind them and this and that. Some of these people in person, let me be kind, are not impressive.
No, they're not. But that's why marketing is vital, because they're not the brilliant people. That's why marketing works. If these people who are allocating hundreds of millions of dollars were the smartest people on earth, you couldn't market to them because they would know what they want. They would know how to get it. They'd know how to frame risk. They'd know who was performing. You're basically marketing to the inefficiencies of communication, the fact that you can't get all the information all the time. I want to be fair. There's some brilliant people on the LP side. There's just as many idiots on the GP side or the hedge fund side.
On the government side, you got these huge government pensions out there and all this capital that needs to be allocated or that they want to allocate. We've all had our experience with DMV or the local government. I think sometimes we forget that that same mindset, at least from what I've seen, and I know, look, there's going to be exceptions to the rule, but I think it's safe to say that some government pension money is allocated by the same type of people that literally work at DMV.
It's so true. Are you going to have better luck going to that person and proving that you're way smarter than they are, or by being nice? One of my favorite lines is from the movie Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. It's just be nice until it's time not to be nice. But the hedge fund world, everyone's so focused on having everyone know that they're really smart, they can come across as elitists and assholes. You have someone who isn't on one of these government pensions or corporate pensions who came through the industry, maybe worked in a mill, doesn't have that Harvard finance MBA. Treat them with respect. That's how you get the money. That's why people buy Ford trucks when the GM's better, because they like that company. For these hedge funds, they need to be likable. And you're starting to see that sort of shift now where you have to have some sort of personality in terms of your marketing efforts because people understand that it's just not about performance. It took a long time for the world to get to that point because it took a long time for the world to get so saturated where we don't need another hedge fund or ETF or private equity fund. So be nice.
So in your experience, obviously you worked with Salem, and Salem is a heck of a personality. I just interviewed him in the last 2 weeks for the first time in a little while. Speak to some examples, if you can, about specific traders or fund managers that just could walk into a room and hold that room. For me, I've met some really interesting people, but maybe a little too introverted to like walk into the room and hold the room. Salem would be one example for me where he could walk into the room and hold the room. Easy. The other one who I thought was really interesting, Bill Dunn, was just freaking that guy. You walked into the room with that guy, you shook his hand, and it was like, what just happened? Who is this magnetic, charismatic guy? But on the flip side, I remember shaking hands with John Henry, and bless him, he's super successful, but he was not a charismatic guy.
A lot of these people aren't. That's the general problem. That's why you hire Sean Jordan, who's more charisma than 10 human beings. You need to find people who have that capacity and ability. If you don't, it's a hard thing to do for a lot of these people because their egos won't let them understand that they shouldn't be in the room. Salem's a great example. He's an awesome speaker. Very, very interesting. A lot aren't. If you're not, you have to recognize that, and you have to spend more time investing in how you structure, how you tell your story. It always comes back to that. Can you tell someone why they should care in 3 sentences? Most people can, which is strange because it's critical.
Back to our sitting down at the airport and you're giving those 3 reasons. I keep coming back to my own mind where it's, even though you're sitting here and you're telling people that's what they need to do, it sounds very simple from you, but there is so much experience, your own experience, so much research, so much writing from all kinds of other people to have the confidence to start the conversation with boom, boom, boom versus diarrhea of the mouth and rambling on, etc. You make it sound simple, but there's a lot behind.
It's extremely challenging to come up with those 3 reasons in a world that is very saturated. Oh, why do you care? Because of how we think about risk. Well, everyone can say that. That doesn't work. You do have to invest in really thinking about that stuff. Working with Salem, a beautiful example. Why do you invest with us? They used to struggle and fight with the fact they were in Canadian Texas. You've been there, I've been there. It's out there. So working with Salem, we determined that one of his reasons were in Canadian Texas. When you say that, the first thing you're thinking, if you're on the other side of the table, is A, where the hell is Canadian Texas? And why do I care about that? I'm intrigued now. It's important because he's not in the noise. He's not distracted. When you think about that, it becomes a very compelling storyline. If someone has a problem with that, you need to know quickly because you don't invest 6 months trying to sell them if they're never going to invest with someone in Canadian Texas. It's about coming up and understanding those moments, those things. We work with some pretty big shops. We spend a long time going through very detailed processes to figure that shit out. Just roughly how we do that is you ask everyone, all the people involved in telling the story, tell me 12 reasons why someone should care about you. We ask for 12 because 3, everyone says the same shit. And you need people sitting there and trying to get to 12. So when they're trying to get to 12, what they're doing is they're trying to dig beyond the obvious. And so we put all those things on a board. What does your competition say? If they don't know that, then that's a problem. When you start saying, okay, they say this sort of stuff. So, well, we need to take those things out. Is that different? No. Is this different? No. They never sort of say specifically, this is the one thing. But what you end up with a grouping of things that become the pool of idea that forms the real reason. Everyone sort of said these things. Well, what are you actually saying when you talk about these things? And when you get in a room with a bunch of people, like, well, this is what we mean. This is what we mean. So can you frame this way? As a marketing person, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, okay, this is not something that this industry tends to say. Using different words to describe something that captures the true integrity of what you really want to say. That's marketing risk.
When I did my first book, Trend Following, and it came out in 2004, the first edition, started working on it in 2002. And the reason I was confident about doing that book, there's no research or anything. It was just, I was looking at all of these quotations and insights from so many different traders, information that was not really in the public sphere, meaning it was buried in old articles. It was buried in this or buried in that, but it wasn't in their no disclosure documents. It wasn't in their marketing materials. Their marketing materials were boring as shit. So I was just like, wow, there's all of this amazing content that's buried. And these guys, they don't even realize what it is about themselves that's interesting. And so I thought to myself, well, they don't realize. I think I realize. So I'm going to take this risk and do this book and basically categorize all of these insights that they weren't even using to describe themselves. And then essentially the reason why that book did good is because light bulb, oh shit, this guy, by doing this book about trend follow, we now see that we look good. That's kind of what happened.
It's slowing down and figuring out what your story is. And a lot of these people don't know why they're interesting. That's why we go talk to the LPs and ask them, why do you invest with these people? Why are they cool? And it's amazing what the LPs say. It's typically not why the GP thinks an LP's with them.
It's got to be when they say something, though. There's like two forms of content coming out of, let's say, a trader or a fund's mouth. To me, one form of content is just bullshit. Everyone's saying that. That's the same shit. That's nonsense. Or there's some interesting way they're describing the markets or their trading strategy or whatever, something that no one else has made that analogy or said. I remember Bill Dunn saying, we just ride the bucking bronco. It's like, that's so beautiful and so simple. I remember asking Bill, can I use that on my front cover as a quotation for, he's like, sure. That's the gold right there.
That's being interesting. The sale happens in the 30 seconds you're walking the people from the boardroom to the elevator. That's when they say the good shit.
You've got to explain that, because a lot of people, unless they've lived it, are going to have no clue what that really means.
Everyone sits in these big boardrooms, and I've been in more than a lot of people, and they just start talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. But it's that moment when all of the marketing materials have been absorbed, and they're saying, this is why you give a shit about us. We have all this stuff, but it's really about this. I've listened to so many people in rooms, and I hear those moments you just described, and I'm like, why isn't that in your goddamn deck? Your deck is boring as sin. It's like 78 pages, and I can't get through 2 pages of it. Say the interesting shit. We created what we call hero pages in decks. I think we almost probably invented this for this business. It didn't matter how sophisticated the hedge fund. You want a page in your deck with one sentence that is a visually stunning page that's inspiring, because that's what people remember. That's what people stop at. That's how people re-engage in information.
Steve Jobs 101.
Exactly. Why doesn't this industry look at the great marketers of the world? Stop looking at the industry. Look at Nike. Look at BMW. Look at the Four Seasons. Look at these people who build brand for a living. Those are the smart marketers.
Even the famous names at the top of the heap today that are massive, I won't name them, but everyone knows, it's kind of hard to find details. I mean, for example, Jim Simons, there was an interesting book written about him from Greg Zuckerman in the last couple of years. Really interesting book, some great insights in there. Before that, there was nothing. It was just, he's the mysterious, brilliant mathematician with fantastic performance and high fees. And that has built him a bloody fortune. His company's hugely successful. But until that book, it was just all mystery.
Here's how you think about that will blow your mind. Today, Jim Simons may not even be able to get his fund off the ground. That's what people don't understand. Raising assets and becoming this global phenom 25 years ago was a different game.
First movers made a big difference in this world.
Yeah, there are the great managers out there, but they were playing on a different board. I bet if you got 10 of the best managers out there with the most AUM, everyone's closed, you can't invest with them anymore. If you put 10 of them as startups today, 5 of them would probably not make it. Marketing has changed.
What you're essentially saying is some of these big names that we might know that are massive funds, they started at a certain time, and that was a certain advantage. We have to recognize that advantage, and then we have to play the game over and say, okay, if we're starting today, what's going to happen? You can't necessarily play it that same way. You're going to have to apply, as you're making the point in this conversation, brand marketing. You can't ignore like they ignored. That's not going to work today.
Walking in a room and saying like, I'm a quantitative mathematician isn't unusual now. Why? Because of the success of Jim. So what did that did? It bred people like him chasing this business. And a lot of them got in and a lot of them became gazillionaires. But that's just made it harder for that person who just walks out of school, who's a mathematician now. How do you compete? Well, you have to compete with different pieces on the board. That's marketing risk. That's content marketing. That's a dynamic website that is full of interesting things. Like these are the modern tools that you have to now use in order to be successful. People don't have time to go find things anymore. Like you're going on a vacation. You can't find a hotel. The hotel you're looking for has no content on, no images, no pictures, no nothing. Are you going to stay at that hotel? God, no. This is not any different. I am moving quickly. I want information. I don't have to talk to a goddamn person because that takes too much time. I want to go to their website and I want to see if this is interesting. Back in the day, being this elusive hedge fund, walking down the street, oh, that's that guy, that's that guy. That doesn't exist anymore. I could give two shits that you run a hedge fund. I don't want to talk to you. Why? Because we have younger people who are now in position of having to research these things. They can't get off the damn phones for 10 seconds. Do you think they're going to spend time trying to figure out who you are if you don't have a website? No. Evolve with the market. People who are big now, they raise most of their assets in a different time period.
Back in the day, I thought to myself, well, okay, I want to go down this same path as the John Henrys and the Bill Dunns and stuff. But then everyone's got to be honest about what the opportunity is in front of them. And for me, sitting there as a complete outsider, I think you were a complete outsider at one time too, as a complete outsider, the path that I went down was the only path that made sense from an odds perspective. It's different than what I thought, but I think that's life. You did not think that you were going to go from hydraulic fluid to hedge funds. That wasn't part of the plan. It was this Bayesian thing of take this step, take that step. And then the next thing you know, this happens. That's how life goes.
A lot of times the funds that are successful, I used to think there's magic to it. They have to have this special quality. Sometimes it's just bloody luck. You need to have a little bit of wind blowing your way launching a fund these days. You have to have that one person who seeds you, or you could have run into that guy having tripped on something in a bank and met them that way. There's a little bit of chance to business. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but to minimize the risk of failure, be a smart marketer.
Probably for me, the thing that I relate to the most that you said was you're selling hydraulic fluid. You're not selling hydraulic fluid. Instead of walking away and trying something else, you ended up figuring out, oh, some of this swag will incentivize people. I mean, I relate to that, putting up a 4-page website in 1996. I knew I was getting a lot of traffic. You just had to keep trying and experimenting. Too much of that has been lost today because people go to school, they spend $200,000 for a degree, they think they're learning something, they're not learning a damn thing. The only thing, and I know you'll agree with me, the only thing you can really learn is if you get out there in the real world where people are spending real money and making real decisions, and then you can learn something. Then you can figure something out. You can read about that in the book, but if you don't try it, then you don't get the confidence. And then when you have the confidence, you're indestructible.
It's no different. I thought I was selling hydraulic fluid back in the day. I wasn't. I was selling NASCAR. This industry thinks they're selling performance. They're not. Why? Because you can get performance anywhere. What are you actually selling? Figure that out and you'll be successful.
Kyle, cool stuff. We should catch up again. I think I could take you down all kinds of paths. I don't know how much of the life secrets and the behind the curtain you want to share, but you talk to a person like me, I might slowly just pull more and more of it out of you, or maybe not.
I am always around. I'm easy to find. If someone has any interest in talking about any of this stuff, I'm here. So hope it helps. It's almost like I was saying earlier, like it's almost like you have to teach a new religion. Thinking about marketing is important in the alt sector is helping people learn a new religion. You have to believe that. To believe that, you have to first acknowledge that performance isn't everything. You can't believe performance is everything and be a good marketer, because you don't want to talk about performance to be a good marketer, because you can't guarantee that. And then you look like a greaseball when you don't perform.
Cool stuff, man. Thank you.
Rock and roll. We'll talk soon.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.